It was a slow Tuesday night in Oak Haven, one of those cities that never really slept, just dimmed its lights and let its sins breathe in the dark. Two officers sat in their patrol car, the rain tapping lightly on the windshield. Frank Miller, a veteran with 20 years on the force, leaned back and exhaled smoke through the crack of his window. Kevin Russo, 10 years younger, restless and anxious, tapped the steering wheel. "You think the quota's real this month?" Russo muttered. "It's always real, kid," Miller replied. "They want numbers, not justice." Then the radio crackled. "Anonymous tip, possible drug handoff, black male, mid-30s, gray hoodie, near 5th and Cooper Alley." Miller smirked. A perfect opportunity. He started the engine, the siren lights off. The alley was barely lit. Trash cans toppled, rainwater pooling under flickering lamps. There stood David Jones, or at least that's what the officers thought his name was. Tall, calm, holding a small paper bag. Russo approached first. "Evening. What's in the bag?" Jones lifted it slightly. "Dinner." Miller stepped in, grabbing the bag, tossing it aside. "Hands on the wall." When Jones didn't move fast enough, Miller shoved him. Russo pulled him back, cuffed him roughly. It all happened so quickly, like muscle memory from years of profiling. Then came the moment of corruption. Russo reached into his own jacket, pulled out a small bag of white powder, and slivered it into Jones's coat. Jones watched quietly. No struggle, no panic. His calmness unnerved him. "You under arrest for possession with intent to distribute," Miller announced, proudly, almost rehearsed. The man looked straight into Miller's eyes, voice steady. "You sure you want to do this?" Miller laughed. "Oh, I'm sure." As they dragged him toward the cruiser, a streetlight flickered above him, catching a faint reflection from Jones's wristwatch, sleek, silver, with a small red glint. Neither officer noticed. Inside the patrol car, Russo finally exhaled. "Another one off the streets." Miller nodded, lighting another cigarette. "Yeah, one less problem in the report." But from the back seat, Jones whispered under his breath, "One less problem for who?" His tone wasn't fearful. It was calculated, like a man counting every second, every mistake they made. Outside, thunder rolled across Oak Haven. Inside that squad car, a storm much bigger had just begun. The holding cell in Oak Haven's downtown precinct smelled of sweat, bleach, and fear. Fluorescent lights hummed above like a broken conscience that refused to sleep. David Jones sat quietly on the metal bench, hands cuffed, face expressionless. Across from him, two junkies argued over who'd get the next phone call. But Jones didn't seem to belong there. His posture was too composed, his gaze too focused. Officer Russo watched from behind the glass window, arms crossed. "Guy's too calm. You'd think he'd be crying or begging for a lawyer." Miller smirked. "That's how they all start, tough until the cuffs get tight." He pushed open the interrogation room door. "Let's have a chat, Mr. Jones." The unquestioning was routine. At least it was supposed to be. Miller asked the same tired questions, flipping through the report as if he were rehearsing for an audience. "Who do you buy from? Who do you sell to? You run with anyone from the east side?" Jones didn't answer. He only studied the officers' faces, like he was memorizing every wrinkle, every twitch. Russo, nervous from the silence, slammed a folder on the table. "Answer the damn question!" Jones tilted his head slightly. "You ever think about how quickly a lie spreads in this building?" The words hung in the air. Miller shot him a glare. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just wondering how long it takes before someone realizes they planted the wrong evidence."
For the first time, Russo's eyes flickered with uncertainty. You think you're smarter than us? No, I think you're predictable. Hours later, Miller and Russo submitted their final report. Suspect caught with controlled substance, resisting arrest. Captain signed off without reading it. A good bust meant good press. Down the hallway, Detective Lena Petrova, a young public defender turned prosecutor, caught sight of Jones through the glass. Something in his calm demeanor didn't sit right with her. She jotted his name into her notebook, frowning. David Jones. Where have I heard that name before? That night, as the precinct quieted, Jones lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The faint red light of his wristwatch blinked once, then twice. In a secure room somewhere across town, a monitor flickered to life. Audio feed began to stream. You're under arrest for possession of hands on the wall. A woman's voice on the other end whispered, Audio's clean. We've got them. Jones smiled faintly in the darkness. Phase 1, complete.
3 weeks later, the courthouse of Oak Haven County buzzed like a hive on Judgment Day. The marble floors gleamed, but the air felt heavy, thick with prejudice and politics. Reporters waited outside. 2 cops, uniforms pressed, walked in like heroes. Miller and Russo smiled for the cameras. Inside, Judge Ryan Porter adjusted his black robe, a man whose reputation preceded him, tough on crime, especially when the defendants were poor or black. Case number 4827, State of Oak Haven versus David Jones. The bailiff's voice echoed. The defendant rose. Jones stood tall, wrists cuffed, suit slightly wrinkled, but eyes clear. Prosecutor Gerald Klein strutted forward, voice dripping with confidence. Your Honor, this is an open and shut case. 2 officers with exemplary service records apprehended the defendant in possession of cocaine. Clear evidence, clear intent. Lena Petrova, the public defender appointed to the case, pushed her glasses up. She was nervous, but determined. Your Honor, my client asserts that the evidence was planted. The body cam footage from the arresting officers. Judge Porter cut her off sharply. Body cams malfunction all the time, Ms. Petrova. Don't waste this court's time with conspiracy theories. But sir, the police report... Enough. Porter's gavel slammed. We will not question the integrity of our law enforcement officers in my courtroom. Jones didn't flinch. He leaned toward Lena and whispered, Don't fight him here. Just watch. She blinked, confused, but nodded slowly. Throughout the day, witness after witness, all police colleagues, took the stand, each rehearsed like actors in a play. Russo's hands trembled when he testified. He avoided Jones's gaze. When it was Jones' turn to speak, Lena approached the stand carefully. Mr. Jones, can you tell the court what happened the night of your arrest? Jones's voice was calm, steady. 2 officers stopped me. They searched me. Then one of them placed something in my pocket. Klein laughed loudly. And I suppose the moon told you that. No, Jones replied. My watch did. The courtroom murmured. Porter frowned. Enough riddles, Mr. Jones. Stick to the facts. Jones only nodded. I am. After closing arguments, the jury was dismissed for deliberation. 45 minutes later, they returned. We, the jury, find the defendant, David Jones, guilty on all counts. Lena's heart sank. Porter smiled thinly. Finally, some justice in this city. Jones looked down, exhaled slowly, almost like a man counting down to something. In the gallery, a man in a dark suit checked his phone. A single message flashed across the screen. Phase 2, green light. That night, the city slept believing justice had been served. But in a quiet federal office downtown, files began to move, names began to flag, and the storm began to take shape.
The morning of sentencing was gray and cold, even for Oakhaven. Outside the courthouse, camera crews gathered like vultures waiting for a final shot. Headlines already read, "Drug trafficker to receive maximum sentence." The ink hadn't even dried, but the verdict was sealed long before the gavel hit wood. Inside, the courtroom filled with that smug stillness of people convinced they were on the right side of history. Judge Ryan Porter adjusted his tie, his white hair slicked back like a man proud of his role in protecting the city. Lena Petrova sat at the defense table, exhausted but still scanning her notes, papers now useless, motions denied, evidence dismissed. She glanced at Jones, chained but upright, calm as ever. "Why aren't you angry?" she whispered. Jones gave a faint smile. "Because the truth doesn't need anger to win. It just needs time." Her brow furrowed, not understanding, but she saw something in his eyes, something she couldn't name. Porter cleared his throat. "Before sentencing, I have a few words to say." The courtroom quieted. His tone was self-righteous, dripping with prejudice, barely hidden under formality. "This city has been poisoned by drugs and violence, and for too long, certain individuals, certain communities have refused to take responsibility for the chaos they breed." Every word landed like a slap. Lena clenched her fists under the table. "Men like you," Porter said, pointing at Jones, "pretend to be victims, but you are the rot that infects this nation's backbone." Gasps rippled through the room. Lena rose instantly. "Objection, Your Honor! That is blatant prejudice!" "Sit down, Miss Petrova, before I hold you in contempt!" Lena froze. The gavel slammed again. Jones, still seated, lifted his head slowly, eyes fixed on the judge. In the back row, a few unfamiliar faces sat motionless, dark suits, earpieces barely visible beneath their collars. One of them checked his watch, whispering into a mic, "Stand by." The atmosphere shifted. It was as if the air itself knew something the court didn't. Porter continued his tirade, pacing dramatically, his voice echoing through the marble chamber. 20 years, that's what men like you deserve. Maybe then the streets will be safe again." He raised the gavel high, about to deliver what he thought was divine judgment. And then Jones spoke. Calm, clear, unflinching. "Before you do that, Judge Porter, there's something you should know." The gavel froze midair. "My name isn't David Jones." Murmurs spread. The bailiff frowned, confused. "Then who the hell are you?" Porter snapped. Jones stood up, wrist still cuffed, voice firm enough to cut through the tension. "My name is Adrian Cross. I'm the chief of the Office of Professional Responsibility, Federal Bureau of Investigation." A long, stunned silence followed. Then, a click. Dozens of badges flashed open from inside the gallery. FBI agents. Lena gasped. Russo, sitting behind Miller, went pale. Miller's jaw locked in disbelief. And Judge Porter? His gavel slipped from his trembling hand. What is this?" Cross looked him dead in the eye. "This," he said softly, "is the sound of your empire collapsing." For a heartbeat, the courtroom froze, a tableau of disbelief. Then chaos erupted. Gasps turned into shouts. Cameras flashed. Reporters rushed for the doors. Judge Ryan Porter stood there, mouth half open, words lost somewhere between outrage and fear. This is an outrage! I demand order! But no one listened. The sound of badges snapping open drowned him out. Every spectator in the back row was now standing, guns drawn, jackets flaring open to reveal the gold seal of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. At the center, Adrian Cross, no longer David Jones, lifted his cuffed hands calmly. An agent approached, unlocking the restraints. Cross flexed his wrists once, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black device, the wristwatch from before. Everything you said, every order you gave, it's all recorded. He turned it on. The courtroom speakers hissed, then crackled to life. Miller's voice filled the air. You sure you want to do this? Oh, I'm sure. The sound of a plastic bag being unzipped, the click of handcuffs, the laughter. Gasps erupted. Russo covered his face with his hands. Miller tried to bolt, but two agents had already pinned him to the floor. Frank Miller, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, evidence tampering, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. Miller snarled, You set us up! No, you set yourselves up. Porter staggered back a step. This is a violation of my court. You have no jurisdiction here. Cross turned toward him slowly. You're right, Judge Porter. Normally, I wouldn't. But when a federal investigation uncovers that a sitting judge is on the payroll of dirty cops, we make exceptions. An agent stepped forward, holding up a folder. Inside, bank transfers, emails, and a recorded phone call between Porter and Miller. You get me those numbers, Frank, and I'll make sure the case dies quietly. The room went dead silent. Lena covered her mouth, tears welling up. The courtroom she'd thought was broken. It wasn't broken anymore. It was being rebuilt, one arrest at a time. Porter's voice trembled. You can't do this. Cross's eyes were calm, almost sympathetic. I already did. Two agents moved in. They removed the judge's robe and snapped cuffs on his wrists. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A man who'd sentenced hundreds, now hearing the Miranda rights himself. You have the right to remain silent. Russo, shaking, turned to Cross. I didn't know it would go this far. Miller made me do it. I'll testify. I'll help. Cross gave a short nod. Then do the right thing, Officer Russo. Start telling the truth. He looked around the courtroom, now a battlefield of fallen authority, and spoke clearly for everyone to hear. This isn't about vengeance. It's about cleansing the rot. Justice doesn't die because of bad men. It dies when good people stay quiet. Lena wiped her tears and whispered, Amen to that. Outside, news vans swarmed the courthouse steps. The once praised heroes of Oakhaven were now being led away in cuffs, flanked by federal agents. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashing like lightning. And in the middle of it all, Adrian Cross walked out under the cold morning light, unflinching, unhurried. Sometimes, he said quietly to Lena, you have to let the disease show before you can heal the system. She nodded. What happens now? Now, Cross said, looking back at the courthouse, the real work begins. The next morning, Oak Haven woke up to a new reality. Every local channel carried the same headline: FBI sting exposes massive police corruption ring. Judge among those arrested. Helicopters hovered over the courthouse. Reporters swarmed the streets. Inside the Federal Bureau's regional office, Adrian Cross sat before a wall of monitors, watching the aftermath unfold like a movie he'd already seen too many times. 12 names scrolled across the screen: officers, detectives, administrators, even a deputy district attorney. Every one of them linked by a web of bribes, false reports, and cover-ups. "Operation Clean Slate," Cross murmured, tapping the folder shut. In another room, Kevin Russo sat under the pale light of an interrogation lamp. His hands shook as he signed the statement. Across from him, Special Agent Carlin Nguyen recorded every word. "They told us it was just routine," Russo confessed. "The tip-offs weren't random, they were chosen. Judge Porter, he cleared every one of those cases before trial." Nguyen nodded quietly. "And you helped frame how many?" Russo's eyes filled with tears. "Too many." The recorder clicked off. Silence lingered. Heavy. Final. Meanwhile, Frank Miller sat in a federal holding cell, stripped of his badge, staring at his reflection in the metal table. Gone was the swagger, the smirk. Only disbelief remained. A guard opened the door. "You've got a visitor." Cross stepped in. No suit jacket this time, just a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled. "Frank," he said evenly, "you had 20 years to do the right thing. Why now?" Miller's jaw tightened. "You think you're better than me? You wore a wire, pretending to be a criminal." "I pretended," Cross said quietly. "You didn't." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the fluorescent lights filled the space. Cross finally stood. "You'll have time to think about every life you destroyed. Maybe that's justice enough." Across town, Lena Petrova stood at a press podium outside the courthouse, sunlight glinting off the microphones. "Today isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming trust. No justice system survives without accountability. And today, Oak Haven took its first breath again." The crowd erupted in applause. Behind her, banners read, "Reform begins here." That night, in the quiet of his office, Cross looked out the window at the city skyline. The lights flickered like restless stars. Justice served, but not yet complete. He reached for the photo on his desk, an old picture of his father, a black police officer framed for misconduct decades ago. Beneath it, a handwritten note: "Change comes slow, son, but when it comes, make it count." Cross smiled faintly. "I did, Dad," he whispered. The phone rang. Agent Nguyen's voice came through the speaker. "Adrian, we've got something new. A bank trail. Looks like this goes beyond Oak Haven." Cross exhaled, already reaching for his coat. "Then we're not done yet." Outside, the city hummed, unaware that it had just survived a quiet revolution. The powerful had fallen, but the real battle, the one for trust, truth, and reform, had just begun.
2 months later, Washington, D.C. Rain fell hard over the marble steps of the J. Edgar Hoover Building, the kind of relentless storm that makes the world feel like it's trying to wash itself clean. Inside, under dim fluorescent light, Adrian Cross walked down a long corridor lined with portraits of past FBI directors. His reflection flickered between them like a ghost moving through history. He had been summoned by the deputy director, but he already knew why.
When you dig deep enough into rot, you don't just find dirt, you find roots. In the conference room, the air was thick. A dozen men and women sat around the table, all wearing the same expression, concern, wrapped in authority. Deputy Director Wallace leaned forward, hands clasped. Agent Cross, Operation Clean Slate was a success. National media's calling it the biggest internal purge in 30 years. But, Cross raised an eyebrow. There's always a but. Wallace sighed. Adrian, what you uncovered, it goes higher than Oakhaven. The money trail leads to a federal contract network. Defense, infrastructure, even narcotics enforcement. Someone powerful is pulling the strings. He slid a file across the table. We want you to lead the follow-up operation. Codename Project Exodus. Cross flipped the folder open. Photos, names, offshore accounts. And at the top of the pyramid, Senator Grant Caldwell. A man with perfect teeth, a spotless record, and a reputation for being tough on crime. Cross's jaw tightened. The man who built his career preaching justice. Wallace nodded, and built his fortune selling it. That night, back in his apartment, Cross sat at the edge of his bed. The city lights blinked outside his window like coded signals. He turned on the TV, every channel filled with chaos, hearings, denials, talking heads debating morality. Then a familiar voice. Lena Petrova, now a rising public advocate, giving an interview. People say one man can't change a system. Maybe that's true, but one man can make the system show its face. Cross smiled faintly. She'd learned fast. He shut the TV off and stared at the folder marked Exodus. His father's words echoed again. Change comes slow, son, but when it comes, make it count. The next morning, Cross walked into the bureau again, but this time not as a man defending himself. He was a hunter stepping into a new game, one where every move could either clean the nation's veins or poison them forever. He looked at Nguyen waiting by the elevator, 2 coffees in hand. You ready for round 2? He asked. Nguyen grinned. You tell me, Chief, how deep does the rabbit hole go? Cross took the cup. Far enough that some people won't want us to come back. As the elevator doors closed, the reflection of the FBI SEAL glinted between them, half shadow, half light. The reckoning had begun.
Washington buzzed like a hornet's nest. Senator Grant Caldwell had just announced his bid for vice president, standing tall on the Capitol steps, flanked by flags, reporters, and a sea of applause. Together, he declared, we will restore faith in our institutions and keep America safe from corruption. The irony wasn't lost on Adrian Cross. From the back of the crowd, wearing a simple gray coat and dark glasses, he watched the man smile for the cameras, the same man his new investigation called the architect of systemic rot. Next to him, Agent Carlin Nguyen muttered, He's good. Too good. Cross nodded. He's not good. He's rehearsed. 2 hours later, deep inside a quiet safe house near Arlington, a small team gathered around a glowing table full of evidence. Offshore accounts, encrypted transfers, shell companies, all connected to the same political machine. On the wall hung a map of the U.S., red pins spreading like an infection, each one a city where corrupt money had bought silence. Nguyen tapped the screen. Caldwell's Patriot Foundation funnels millions in federal grant money into fake opioid rehab centers. Most are just laundering fronts. Cross leaned forward. And the Oversight Committee never questioned it? Nguyen smirked bitterly. Hard to question something when the committee chairman gets campaign donations from the same shell companies. Cross exhaled slowly. Then Caldwell isn't just buying silence. He's renting loyalty. That night, Lena Petrova appeared on Cross's encrypted line. Her face was tired but fierce. You're going after Caldwell, aren't you? Cross didn't answer. Adrian, listen to me. You bring him down, you'll expose the entire funding chain. That means the Bureau, the DOJ, maybe even the White House. Then maybe it's time they all looked in the mirror, he said. Lena stared through the screen. And if they break it instead? Cross smiled faintly. Then they'll see what monsters they've become. 2 weeks later, an anonymous file leaked to the press. It contained bank records showing Caldwell's private security firm had secretly funneled money to local police departments during the Oak Haven trials. The story exploded. Social media ignited. The public wanted answers. Caldwell's team immediately called it political sabotage, but the damage was done. A fracture in his perfect armor. In a penthouse high above D.C., Caldwell threw the leaked documents across the table. "Find out who did this," he barked. His aide swallowed hard. "Sir, whoever this is, they're using bureau-level encryption. Someone inside." Caldwell's face darkened. "Then we'll smoke them out." He turned toward the window, watching lightning flash over the Potomac. "If the FBI wants war, I'll give them one." Meanwhile, in the dark of the safe house, Cross's phone buzzed. A message. "They know." He glanced at Nguyen. It started. She looked up, eyes steady. "Then we finish it." The rain began to fall outside, heavy, rhythmic, unrelenting. The senator had made his move, but Cross had been playing this game longer.
The Bureau was no longer a fortress. It was a battlefield. Whispers moved faster than emails. Loyalties cracked under pressure. Within days of the Caldwell leak, internal memos vanished, agents were reassigned overnight, and encrypted servers mysteriously malfunctioned. It wasn't just corruption anymore. It was containment. Cross stood in the FBI's underground war room, staring at the glowing monitors as red alerts flashed across every screen. "We've been compromised," Nguyen said quietly. "How bad?" "Every division from cyber to financial crimes is being pulled into oversight reviews. Caldwell's people are using the Patriot Foundation as a front to buy our own damned systems." Cross's jaw tightened. "Then we fight back the old way, with truth and time." At that same moment, Lena Petrova was summoned to a closed-door session on Capitol Hill. 3 men in suits, all senior officials, sat across from her, polite smiles hiding razor words. "Miss Petrova," one began, "your recent collaboration with Director Cross appears extrajudicial." "You mean effective," she shot back. "We mean reckless," another corrected. "The Bureau isn't your personal crusade. If you continue digging into Senator Caldwell's finances, you may face charges of obstruction." Lena leaned forward, voice sharp. "Obstruction of what? Justice?" The room went silent. For a moment, her own reflection stared back from the polished table. Tired, determined, unbreakable. She stood up. "Then charge me." Back at the Bureau, Cross and Nguyen set their trap. They'd uncovered a secret server, one Caldwell's security firm had installed in the basement archives, hidden behind false credentials. It was more than evidence. It was a kill switch, a database capable of erasing or fabricating federal records. Cross placed a drive into the port, running a silent data clone. Nguyen kept watch at the door. "You really think this'll be enough?" she whispered. "It won't just expose Caldwell. It'll expose everyone who let him in." The transfer bar hit 92%. Then the lights cut out. "They're here," Nguyen hissed. A voice echoed through the dark, smooth, controlled. "Agent Cross, you of all people should know how dangerous it is to dig too deep." Caldwell himself stepped into the doorway, flanked by 2 black-suited operatives. "You're trespassing in your own agency. How poetic." Cross didn't flinch. "And you're bleeding my country from the inside out." "Your country? You still think this place belongs to you?" Gunmetal tension filled the room.
Nguyen reached for her sidearm. One of Caldwell's men mirrored the move. Then, in one sharp motion, Cross pulled a flash grenade from his coat and tossed it toward the server rack. White light, a blast, the alarm screamed to life. When the smoke cleared, Cross and Nguyen were gone, the clone drive still intact, tucked into Cross's jacket. Caldwell staggered, coughing, as sprinklers drenched the room. He looked up at the shattered ceiling camera, and for the first time his composure cracked. "You just declared war, Director Cross," he snarled. "No, Senator. You did that years ago, when you sold justice for power." Outside, in the rain-slicked streets of D.C., Cross and Nguyen disappeared into the night. Somewhere behind them, the Bureau's servers rebooted, erasing the old version of truth and making space for a new one. The war wasn't over. It was just finally out in the open.
The sun rose over Washington, D.C., but it didn't bring peace, only exposure. By dawn, the encrypted files Cross had cloned were live on a public whistleblower site. Names, transactions, recordings, everything Caldwell and his network had buried under layers of bureaucracy, now spilled across every major news outlet. FBI whistleblower leaks explosive evidence of systemic corruption, read the morning headline. Senator Grant Caldwell linked to multi-million-dollar laundering scheme tied to federal police grants. Caldwell's empire cracked overnight. Inside his luxury office overlooking the Potomac, he hurled his phone across the room as the TV blared. His campaign staff huddled in silence, phones buzzing like angry bees. "This is impossible," Caldwell shouted. "Who gave them access?" His aide, pale and trembling, whispered, "It's not just the press, sir. The Bureau's Internal Affairs has launched an emergency review. Half your donors are pulling out." Caldwell's jaw flexed. "Then we go scorched earth. If I burn, they all burn with me." At the FBI safe house, Cross stood in front of a wall of monitors. He'd been awake for 48 hours straight, calm but hollow-eyed. Nguyen approached with 2 mugs of coffee. "You did it," she said softly. "No," Cross replied. "We did it. And now the real work starts." On one screen, Lena Petrova stood outside the courthouse addressing reporters. "This isn't about one man. It's about the system that protected him. Today, we demand accountability, not just punishment." Her words spread like wildfire. Across the country, protests erupted, not of rage, but of hope. People carried signs that read, "Truth over power," and "Justice has a name." By evening, Caldwell was arrested. Cameras flashed as federal agents led him down the courthouse steps in handcuffs. He tried to look defiant, but the weight of exposure hung heavy in his eyes. One reporter shouted, "Senator Caldwell, do you have anything to say to the people?" He paused, face hard. "They'll miss me when they see what comes next." Then he was pushed into the armored van. Later that night, Cross sat alone in a quiet diner in Arlington, the kind of place where no one asked questions and the coffee never stopped pouring. Outside, rain tapped against the window, soft and steady. A young waiter recognized him from the news. "Sir, I just wanted to say, thank you. My brother got locked up for something he didn't do. Maybe now things change." Cross smiled faintly. Change is never clean, but it starts when people stop looking away. He left a generous tip and stepped into the rain. As he walked down the empty street, a black SUV pulled up beside him. The window rolled down. Lena sat in the driver's seat. "You're not disappearing again, are you?" Cross looked toward the Capitol dome glowing faintly in the mist. "Not this time. There's still too much rot left to clear." Lena smiled. "Then let's get to work." They drove off into the dark.
two silhouettes against a city finally starting to wake up. Justice isn't a verdict, it's persistence. And sometimes it wears a badge.